everybody. I'm Mike.
And I'm Austin.
Today we're going to be going over difficult conversations you can have during the pre-deployment stage and just leading things into deployment. So to get started here, first thing we're going to talk about is power of attorney. Power of attorney is important because you need to define the type, how much power you want to give, and to whom you want to give that power to. These are important because you're going to have things back home when you deploy, and you're going to want whoever's back home to be able to take care of things. For some people, it's parents. For others, it's significant others, spouses. It could be anybody. But making sure that's defined is important because you need to have total trust in that person because they're going to control your life back home until you get back. And they're going to have whatever power you give them to do that with. So just being sure in your power of attorney is very important.
And on top of that, you're also going to maybe want to discuss your SGLI regarding specifically how much SGLI can be expected and whether that number should be adjusted. So an important part of that is in the off chance that the soldier loses his life, the significant other is going to have to plan the memorial service for that, and they need to know how much money that they can expect coming in. I'd imagine a lot of couples have already had this conversation, but if you haven't, maybe you're new to the Army, this is your first deployment, it's definitely something that you want to talk about. On top of that, when you're filling out your DD-93 form and your will, you want to make sure that those are up to date and with accurate information. And by accurate information, I primarily mean that the people that are on there are the people you want those things to actually go to. We've heard stories of where soldiers have been deployed previously, and with all the chaos going with preparing for deployment, they just sign away their will as if nothing changed from the last deployment. However, sometimes maybe there was an ex-spouse on there, maybe a relative that's no longer involved in their life, or just anything along those lines. You want to make sure that that information is accurate and up to date, and also be pretty open with your significant other and what they can expect from your will.
Moving on, one topic that's on top of everybody's mind is money. And one thing to think about is budgets and banking accounts even. People do this one differently all the time, whether they keep their individual accounts or they have one shared account. The important thing is to know where your money's going, and you need to communicate with the other people in your life about how much money there is and how much money can be allotted for certain things, especially with a shared bank account. There's going to be expenses on both sides. Deployments can vary on how much money people are going to spend. Some forward operating bases are different than others, and you don't know if your deployed family member is going to need extra money there or not. So just that communication, making sure everything's on paper, keeping that budget in line, and then if you need to go over in certain areas, making sure the other person knows that this is going to happen and we need to adjust accordingly.
And so kind of going along those lines, you're going to need to kind of have this conversation, maybe one of the tougher ones, in terms of what decisions you as a couple are comfortable with the other person making alone. And some things that I mean like that is maybe redecorating the house, whether that's painting walls, building a deck, or just making any sort of additions. Another thing could be unexpected expenses, maybe some car damage, house damage, or anything like that. Is that something that you'd be comfortable with the spouse taking care of? Or are there some things that would be preferred to be left alone until you're both together to make that decision as a team? Also, maybe if any charity donations pop up, is that something that you'd be willing to let your significant other to make that decision, donate on their own, or take out a loan? And for a lot of you couples out there who have children, maybe if you want to enroll them in a sport or a club, that the new hobby that comes up for the child that wasn't originally there before the deployment, and even new hobbies for the significant other on their own, like they're going to lose a person who's pretty significant in their life, they're going to have to fill that in some way in order to develop that independence. And so kind of these are just some suggestions of some decisions that you have to discuss. but overall, as the couple, you're going to have to decide what's really important for you.
Another thing you're going to have to look towards is, as anyone going through a deployment, how much contact you're going to be able to expect and what type of communication. Different deployments have different ways of communication. There are some that have 24/7 access to internet connections with Skype and video chat, and you'll be able to communicate with your family almost on a daily basis. But sometimes, understanding that could interfere with the soldier just trying to do their daily job as well. So understanding, hey, I'm gonna call you once daily for this amount of time, and then I have to go to work. That doesn't mean they don't care about you any less. It's that they still have a job to do, and that can honestly be distracting, having too much communication. So understanding there's an established baseline of this is the communication, and this is when I'm going to be able to talk to you. And then also understanding blackouts as well, just in case if there's a death on a deployment. Occasionally, some bases will do blackout communications where a soldier passes away, and until the family can be notified, there's no communications outside of the base back home. And just knowing that sometimes no news is good news, and that you'll be able to try and contact your family back home as soon as possible.
Yeah, and if you listened to our previous podcast, you heard when we talked about stage 1 that the exact deployment date is usually not known. And one of the things that comes with that is there are going to be multiple goodbyes. And what I mean by that is there are going to be multiple days where you're saying goodbye, expecting your soldier to possibly be going off that day, and that may not be the case. And that could be frustrating, especially if you didn't expect that to happen. And then eventually, we've heard some soldiers joke that their families were pushing them out the door, ready for them to leave. So you want to just make sure that you're aware of that, kind of as a family and as a couple, that you're getting rid of that uncertainty, so that's not another stressor added on top of everything already involved. And also, deployments tend to be pretty long, usually 9 months, sometimes up to a year, sometimes more than a year, which inevitably is going to cause that soldier to miss some significant life events. So one thing you could talk about is what are those life events that are actually going to be missed, and is there going to be maybe a different way to celebrate them? Is a soldier just going to FaceTime in if that's a possibility, or are you going to make them up after the soldier gets back as if that was when they actually happened? Or are you just going to drive on and kind of just live life until that soldier's back and reintegrate them so they can partake in new life events in the future?